So the ANC is reportedly pushing for another strategy to carry out land reform without expropriation, and this is at least ahead of their policy conference in July. According to the Sunday Times, the party is now willing to follow the legal route where land reform and agricultural development agencies can be established. One of the proposals sees farmers pledging land for redistribution to emerging black farmers. But how practical is this in solving the land question, so to speak? Well, let's bring in our guest. Professor Ruth Hall is with the University of the Western Cape and joins us via our video link this morning. And Professor Hall, it's great to have you, especially on these issues. Thanks, as always, for your time. Essentially, my understanding is that the ANC's proposal is essentially relying on donations in order to have land reform in this country. But how pragmatic is this in a context where we know at the heart of the contention around this land question is people not even wanting to let their land go to begin with?
Thanks, Ayanda. Let's take a very clear starting point, which is that equitable access to land, access to land on an equitable basis, access to land for those who've been dispossessed is actually a constitutional right. So there is no way that that the realization of a constitutional right can be left in the hand of citizens to fulfill for other citizens. It is a state responsibility, right? And one of the key issues that's been under debate in the past 4 years particularly has been surely the state's approach of simply negotiating with landowners to buy out land with a limited budget has been inadequate, right? Around 10% of agricultural land so far has been transferred from white into black hands, whether through title deed or leasing, through the state's land reform program since '94. So in about nearly 30 years, about 10% of commercial farmland has moved hands. So, we really aren't making any significant dent in this racially and class-wise unequal situation. So the debate about expropriation and expropriation with or without compensation is about the state actually not only having a carrot of buying out land, but also having a stick to say in certain circumstances where offering money is not enough, we will actually expropriate in the interests of transformation. The shift to land donations, of course, means that there's not only no stick, there's no carrot either. So that's the simplest way in which I can explain it. There is nothing wrong with asking those with wealth and power to give it up, but we are in the most unequal society in the world. Access to land, whether it's for farming, small-scale farming, access to land for houses, for small business, for livelihoods, is a basic human right. So land donations, nothing wrong with it, but the concern is that the version of a document that purports to be a discussion document for the ANC's conference makes no mention of expropriation at all and proposes the development of a land reform and agricultural development agency, right, the prime task of which will be to solicit and receive donations from landowners. So let's be clear, there's nothing wrong with it. The point is that the state, the ANC, appears, if this document is correct, to be essentially giving up on the state's responsibility to engage with landless people and to fulfill their right of access to land.
Right, and we'll talk about this proposed development agency in just a moment, but if I'm understanding at least the thrust of your first response is that we can't really leave land reform to people's goodwill, given the challenges we faced in the past.
The idea of reform is that there is a concerted effort made to change an existing situation and structure. So I would say that if the focus of land reform is to become actually just asking those with land to give it up, then actually we've ended land reform. So in the same way that any other right in the Constitution remains the state's responsibility. So I think that what's clear here is that there may be situations where people are willing to give up portions of land. There's no guarantee that it's in the parts of the country and in areas where it's needed. So what we need, and what, in fact, 3 years ago, our Presidential Advisory Panel on Land Reform and Agriculture, which I served on, proposed a range of measures to engage seriously at local levels with people who are landless and homeless, including evicted farm workers, people living on the outskirts of the cities, people who are small-scale farmers who are constrained in the communal areas, and engaging with them about what their land needs are and how to meet them. This should be in every municipality's IDP. every sphere of government should be engaging with people and acting to fulfill these needs, and doing area-based planning in each district to try and address these needs. So for the state to then step back and say, we will merely wait for landowners to offer land and then we will facilitate donations, would amount to the privatization of the entire land reform process.
Sure. And, part of what they're saying this would happen if it were to be adopted at their policy conference in July is through this agency that you've already made mention of. As you also pointed out, the agency is meant to, I guess, kind of facilitate the land donation, as it were. But we're also told it's meant to develop programs to assist new farmers with market access. Something about that, I guess, might resonate, at least the idea of ensuring that whatever form this land reform takes leads to job opportunities. There's something to salvage here, at least from a layman's point of view.
Sure, absolutely. And it's a long-standing issue, which is that we've never quite got right. Here's the land, here's the support, what comes after the actual land. We must always be careful, though, is creating a new institution going to be the solution to the failures of the prior institutions? There has been a problem with coordination in government. Actually, an agency that can cut red tape and get things done on the ground and can be held accountable is actually a very good idea. The question is, what is its mandate? If its mandate is to sit back and wait for people to donate land and not to proactively go out and engage with people. For instance, let's think about many parts of the country where large numbers of farm workers have been evicted. They're living on the outskirts of small towns. Many of them have no hope of getting a job ever in town. They have no livelihood on farms, but they have farming experience. Why are we not engaging to make available small plots of land where people can farm on a part-time basis while also accessing services in town? We've not even tried out these kinds of options. So we need an agency that can act in a proactive manner, focusing on engaging with the landless and people who need land, small-scale farmers, evicted farm workers, the people who are homeless and living on the outskirts of cities, and engage with them and then go and get the land, whether it's on the market or through expropriation, not the other way around, not focusing on waiting for donations. So let's be clear, a donations approach, nothing wrong with it. But the point is, it's deflecting from the real issue. And we cannot have a land reform that has neither a carrot nor a stick.
Got you. It's also important to emphasize that this is just a discussion within the ANC. If it is passed in the ANC, it needs to go to Parliament. And if it goes to Parliament and needs some kind of constitutional changes, it needs a 2/3 majority backing. That hasn't happened, at least in the recent past, around this land question, as it were. How close or far are we, at least in Parliament, in seeing to some kind of constitutional reform in order to solve this land question at all?
Well, let's be clear. Actually, this is not a parliamentary issue at all. This is a policy issue.
Right.
So what we understand from the Sunday Times as being a discussion document within the ANC is about policy choices. The question of amending the Constitution has already come and gone. So from early 2018, a parliamentary process was underway. It ended in December last year when the motion in Parliament failed. And it failed because the ANC's proposed version of the expropriation of the Constitutional Amendment Bill to make possible or make explicit expropriation without compensation was framed in such a way that the economic freedom fighters would not support it. And so that constitutional amendment failed. A separate process that we expect to come through Parliament this year will be the expropriation bill. And of course, I think that will probably pass. It only requires a 50% majority, and it will simply empower and clarify the powers of the state to expropriate, which is quite a normal function. It doesn't go very far in clarifying when there should be no compensation. The point is that if the ANC, as the ruling party, chooses not to use those expropriation powers, then we're back to square one. Of course, we don't know what will happen in the ANC conference, and I expect there to be a big fight around this land issue. Remember that this is often, in a sense, the lightning rod that clarifies the ideological positions within the ANC, but also sometimes it is merely a proxy debate for wider battles and power struggles within the party. So sometimes this debate, in fact, is not really even about land. But I would say this, a focus on land donations is going to be a fight within the ANC and will not go away as an issue in broader society because of the fundamentally unequal access to land, the fundamentally unequal nature of our society, and the fact that land remains a very obvious and historically rooted manifestation of all that is unjust in our society. So I think that what's really crucial now is that progressive forces, whether they're in the ANC, outside the ANC, and other political parties, in society, in civil society, and social movements, very clearly articulate what the kind of broad thrust is of an alternative land reform program. I think that's been done. It's been done in many places. The question now that we have to see is, will the ANC listen?
Fascinating, complex, and so well put. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Professor Ruth Hall is with the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies at the University of the Western Cape.